Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Infinite Realms. Just getting off the reviews for a little bit, and I just wanted to have a little discussion. I think this will be interesting. So, this got brought on by a couple of reasons. One of the ones was Wrestling Week. I lost 2 subscribers. Weird, huh? And started, looking around and noticing something. It seems that, for the most part, there are exceptions that I'll talk about in a minute. For the most part, collectors of wrestling and superhero action figures have a divide. There's just not a lot of crossover between them, which I found strange. Now, that's not 100% true, obviously. I'm a person that does both wrestling and superheroes. Now, just from YouTube, I know Brian Action Figures dabbles in wrestling, but he's mostly on superheroes. I know Lyle's Figure Files crosses both paths. I know I've heard Greg Cook in his toy hunts mention certain figures from wrestling he's looking for. Lex Luger was the most recent one, I think. And of course, there's Kyle Peterson. He does all kinds of reviews, and it's everything. It's across the board, including superheroes. But again, a lot of channels really focus in on superheroes. Some branch out a little bit into other places, but they don't go to wrestling. And I don't see why, because here's what I see. I see larger than life characters, heavy into character and conflict, with violent confrontations, amazing moves and poses. And to me, there is a lot of crossover potential. Some have said professional wrestling to them is sort of like live action superheroes. And I agree with that fully. That's what attracted me to it way back when. Even when, it was more the serious side with NWA and later WCW, then it got silly in WCW. But, it was still, I grew up with Continental Wrestling Federation from Memphis, and, that was one. Um, I grew up, I remember Mid South very well. Those types of things. So it still seemed like some live action superheroes to me. So and say in a more sports setting, obviously, but still, to me, the crossover potential there is so vast. I mean, they almost go hand in hand. They're almost, to me, so similar. So I don't understand. So I put this out to a couple of my friends, and I got some interesting um, back feedback from it. Some are collectors. There was a couple that weren't. But that I just said, hey, what do you think? Why isn't there a lot of crossover between these two genres? So it was kind of interesting. First one was lots of repetition. This came from both camps. It was like, oh god, they put out so many Ultimate Warriors and Hulk Hogan's and Rey Mysterios, and then on the other side, they're going, oh god, they put out so many Spider Mans and so many Wolverines and so many of this and that, and it's the same thing every time. Da da da. It gets boring. Which I think is funny that both sides said that because it's true on both sides. Um, they both seem to repeat a lot. Hey, it is what it is. And the thing is, yeah, there is a lot of repetition in both, and that's why you got to be careful and try to buy the ones you really want. But that is a whole other collecting topic that I may hit on some other day. So another one I heard was dumb characters, and they specifically cited the Razorback coming out in the 5 pack. And as soon as the person said that, it said, that's a stupid character. And I'm like, that's Mantar, dude. It is the exact same premise of Mantar. It's almost the same character. Okay, it's not the exact same premise, but you get my meaning. And there are silly characters in both. Of course, you got Atom Bomb, you've got Doink, You've got the ding dongs in wrestling. Uh, and of course, in comic books, you have crazy characters like Stiltman and the like that just, you know, I mean, yeah, there are some dumb characters in both, but come on. I mean, just because there are some dumb characters doesn't mean that's it for everybody. Okay, one that came from the superhero camp was wrestling is too much like a sport, and nerds are notorious for not liking sports. I could kind of see that one. That made some sense. And it is somewhat like a sport, but, you know, it's not, as we all know now, it's not quite the sport we tend to think of. So, that one does have a valid point to it. If you don't like sports, you're probably not going to like wrestling, is what they were trying to say, I think. Which I found not to be true, but hey, that's that's my thought on it. One that came from both sides is that some people think superheroes are for nerds and children. And yeah, I mean, I've run into this myself online. I got I got a picture of me with my Captain America shield and my daughter with her Captain America shield, and I get, ribbed. I've had people try to rib me about it, and I'm like, what is your problem? I mean, why are you so stuck in thinking in that mentality? But are there some of those people who would love wrestling? Yeah, there are. In fact, some of the ones I've seen, yeah, they would love wrestling. So it's like they're knocking something they don't understand. Now, granted, superheroes have become so much more mainstream now, it's unreal. But, there are still some that hold on to that old adage. It's like, this is for kids. Boo. And they'll act like it. So I think there is some validity in that. Then again, we're talking about action figures here. So, yeah, the four children part kind of falls flat, really. Now, another interesting one that was brought to my attention is brand loyalty, and I'm not going to single anybody out on this, but a lot of the guys on YouTube seem to gravitate more towards Hasbro or more towards Mattel, which I was like, yeah. And I've even heard remarks saying, this looks like a Mattel. And I'm going, wait a minute. You're hitting on something here. Because, we have the old expression of shills who, cater to Hasbro and give everything they want, and cater to Mattel giving them everything they want, and just being yes men, and etc. etc. So, and the funny part is, and again, I'm not singling anyone out, but I am sitting here thinking, yeah, the people who are most like that are the ones that are one way or the other. So, yeah. The exception seems to be, in both cases, He-Man, the Masters of the Universe. That seems to get both camps. And I suppose, obviously if it's brand loyalty to Mattel, that's why. But I think He-Man does enough of a juxtaposition of the superhero stuff to kind of fit in. So I think that might be what it is. Now, another one that was suggested was, and I had to laugh at this one and point out where they were wrong. But they said wrestling fans don't read, and it's like, well, what do you mean? And then it's like, well, they aren't going to read anyway, so they're not going to read comic books. And it's like, well, yeah, but Mick Foley has a very successful career as a writer, just based off of his ring performance. I mean, but he's branched out into other types of writing, so that's not necessarily the case. You can't do bestsellers if, there's that. The other one was wrestling is fake. Because, superheroes are real. I mean, you see guys flying around in capes all the time and throwing shields at bad guys. I mean, that's reality based. I'm sorry, I can't help. That argument is so weak. Uh, So, another good one that was brought to my attention, and it's actually, yeah, I mean, I can see this having a problem, was all the tragedies in wrestling. There's so many. It's Kurt Hennig, guys like Bam Bam Bigelow, who died very young, Rick Rude, who died very young, uh, Randy Savage, who, though retired, did die very young, and of course the Chris Benoit tragedy, which was horrible. That kind of stuff did push people away from wrestling, and I can see that. It's true. I think it's true to a point that there was just so much tragedy. It was heartbreaking, and it was there finally was enough's enough, and you don't want to be reminded of these tragedies. Now, me, I hate these tragedies, but the people who suffer the tragedies, I love them. I still love what they did and what they gave to me, with the entertainment value they gave to me. So, I kind of still stick with them. Anyway, and I get not everyone's going to do that. A lot of people will get caught up in a tragedy, and I mean, yeah, there's been tragedy in comics, but it's not with the characters themselves. It's more along the lines of, if there's a tragedy with the character, somebody wrote it, and then it gets 9 times out of 10 it gets undone. Which, it was another one, the longevity of superheroes. I mean, yeah, you're right. Superheroes last forever. I mean, conceivably, you could keep doing superhero stuff to the end of time. You might have to reboot it a few times, but you could. I mean, Peter Parker has always been a teenager. Well, I know in the comics he's like 30, has his own business, etc., etc. But, what is he in the movies? He's a teenager again. He always goes back to that. So, the more things change, the more they stay the same. But now he's talking about that really old movie, Empire Strikes Back, and that old movie, Alien, when he was a teenager 15 to 20 years before those movies. So, yeah, again, this is what I'm saying. But, you can't do that with wrestling, obviously. Hulkamania cannot have another run now. I mean, don't tell Hogan that he'll come back and try to do something. But look at Ric Flair, he did. But, especially with those tragedies I just mentioned, those guys can't come back and do anything. So that helps a lot too, is that, these characters are still moving and still, telling stories, whereas the other characters cannot. That's not meant as a slight to wrestling, but it is meant that, there is something to be said for the longevity of it. So, that's some good. I thought there were some great points brought up. I don't agree with a lot of them. I agree with some. So now let me turn it over to you. Why do you think that, superhero collectors don't collect wrestling figures and vice versa? And if there is a reason. I mean, just if you are a collector of one and not the other, please, I want to hear your opinions. Just because I just want to, I just find it fascinating that there is this sort of weird disconnect between the two halves that, I don't think should be there. So, yeah, let me know in the comments, and let's have it for when we'll do another one of these videos where we discuss some of the finer points. All right, well, that's going to do it for Infinite Realms. Don't forget to like and subscribe.